Assalamu alaikum, dear listeners. From the platform of Kashana-e-Baseerat, this is Nighat Raza bringing to you the reading of Fatima is Fatima by Dr. Ali Shariyati. We had last finished on page 137, where the subtitle was The Continuation of Muhammad. We start from where we ended, and today we are going to bring you the reading continuing from page 137. What similar and closer union could have been there? The relationships are all comparable. Two human beings are symmetrical to each other, to one another's. Ali is the first person who accepts Islam from the Prophet. He extends the first hand for the Prophet when he is hidden and alone. They join together and from then on stand alongside of all of the dangers and in the midst of all the difficulties until his death. Before the mission, Ali is a small boy of 6 or 7 years old. He takes him alone to Mount Hira. He participates in the depth of asceticism and wonderful prayers and accompanies him day and night. A man can be seen standing, alone in the moonlight, in the silence of the whispering and words of the night of Ramadan, close to the time of the mission, upon the top of Mount Hira. He is either sitting down or closely pacing back and forth, sometimes underneath the rain of inspiration. His head falls under the weight of the whispered feelings. Sometimes he raises his head to the heavens, and in the depths of the ignorance of that, he cries until he finds the way. He is waiting. He sees something which is still unknown to him. During all of these times, a small child, like his shadow, is with him, sometimes on his shoulder and sometimes beside him. Ali is a child of 9 or 10 years old. One night in the home of the Prophet, he enters his mother and father's room, Khadija and Muhammad. He sees them kneeling on the ground and sitting for a while, and then rising, then saying something under their lips, both together. Neither one notices him. He remains in wonder. Finally he asks, "What are you doing?" The Prophet answers, "We are performing our prayers. I have been sent as the messenger to spread the word of submission, Islam, and to call people to the worship of one of the God and my own mission. Ali, I call you as well to it." And Ali, still a child of no more than a few years of age, living in the house of Muhammad, drowned in his kindness and in his greatness, he is Ali. He does not say yes without thinking. Faith must filter through his wisdom and then find its way to his heart. At the same time, his tongue has the tone of his age and years as he says, "Allow me to talk to my father, Abu Talib, and then make my decision." Immediately afterwards, he runs up the stairs to his room to sleep. But this invitation is not an ordinary invitation which Ali, even though only 8 or 10 years old, could take quietly. He stays awake, thinking until dawn. No one knows what effect the words that night had on the thoughts of this boy, but in the morning they hear his footsteps, light but decisive and quiet. They stop beside the door of the Prophet, and in a sweet voice, but with the beauty and perseverance of Ali, he says, "Last night I thought to myself, God, in creating me, had not consulted Abu Talib first. So why should I now ask his opinion about worshipping him? Tell me about Islam." The Prophet speaks to him and says, "I accept." From then on, he finds himself this way and in the midst of this union. He spends every second of his life towards this end. He becomes a wonderful symbol of one who worships God, is loyal to Muhammad and a friend to humanity and devoted to the spirit. He joins with the heart and thoughts of Muhammad in 1,000 ways, both hidden and manifest. Everyone knows this. Muhammad knows it more than others. He senses the thousands of rays of light which fall from his spirit upon Ali. This is why one day, when his spirit is filled with the light which shone upon him from the Prophet, he becomes excited. His heart deeply desires to hear the Prophet's feelings towards him, so he asks, among these two, who is the most beloved of the Prophet, his daughter Fatima Zahra or her husband Ali? The Prophet was at the other end of a difficult question. At the same time that he was required to answer an impossible question, while smiling kindly and softly, he found the answers which he felt would be right for that which all concerned had in their hearts. With a tone full of the victory of pleasure, he answered, Fatima is more beloved to me than you, and you are dearer to me than she. He never tries to show himself to differ from others. Rather, it was the opposite. He would say, I am a human being like you. The only difference is the revelation which I receive. He always declared that he did not know the hidden world, and other than that which is told him, he knows nothing. He was always trying not to stand out or seem peculiar, and as far as possible not to call attention to himself. One day, an old woman approached him to ask him something. All the things that she had heard about him and the greatness she knew he had so affected her that when she found herself in his presence, she trembled and stuttered. The Prophet, who sensed that she had been struck by his person and his presence, moved simply and quietly forward. With kindness, he places his hand upon her shoulder, and in a kind and intimate tone he says, Mother, what is this? I am the son of that Quraysh woman who milked sheep. The depth of his sensitivity, sympathy, and softness of his heart was most amazing. Sometimes inside the house he would so humble himself that in the hands of little Aisha easily reached him. He kisses the hands of Fatima. He analyzes which came from kindness was something special. Ammar is the space between my two eyes. Ali is from me and I am from Ali. Fatima is the part of my body. And now Hassan and Hussein are born. What things did the Prophet not do with these two beloved children? He loved them, the mirror and the vital fruit of the most beloved of his dearest ones and the dearest of his beloveds. He had always showed special kindness towards Fatima and gave her spiritual strength to an extent which cannot even be found among men today. And now from his only remaining daughter, two sons have been found whom he must have loved very dearly. He was so fond of them that everyone expressed amazement. One day he enters Fatma's house as he did every day from the time the children were born, every moment, every hour. He enters. He sees that both Ali and Fatima are asleep and Hassan is hungry and crying. He can find nothing to eat. The Prophet cannot bring himself to wake his dearest and his most beloved. Quietly and barefooted, he takes himself to the sheep in the house, milks it, and gives the milk to the child until he becomes quiet. One day, when he is hurriedly passing Fatima's house, suddenly the cries of Hussein reach his ears. He returns and enters the house, and with his whole body shaking, he yells at Fatima. Don't you understand that his crying causes me pain? Osama ibn Zayd, whom we have mentioned before, says, I had business with the Prophet. I knocked at his door. He came out. As I was talking to him, I realized he had something hidden under his clothes and he was holding on to it with difficulty. But I did not know what it was. When I had finished saying what I had come to say, I asked, What is that which you are holding, Prophet of God? The Prophet, while his face filled with delight and pleasure, pulled apart his cloak, and I saw Hassan and Hussein. At the same time that he wanted to explain his unusual behavior to me, he could not take his eyes off them in a tone full of joy and happiness. As if speaking to himself, he said, These are my two sons and the sons of my daughter. Then, as his voice, full of wonder, is in a melody which cannot be expressed, continued, O God, I love these two, and love those who love them. In the words of a contemporary Arab, if they were to have asked Muhammad which of his daughters should continue his line and which son-in-law would have chosen the same to which God chose. The children of Zahra and Ali sense, in the form of Muhammad, a grandfather, a father, a friend, a relative of the family, a guardian, a companion, and a playmate. They were closer to him, more intimate and freer than their own mother and father. One day during one of the congregational prayers, the Prophet went down in prostration. The prostration continued for such a long time that the people who were praying behind him began to wonder what had happened. In the congregational prayer, the congregation performs the prayer behind an imam or leader, and they all move and perform the prayers in unison. The Prophet had always been swift in his ritual prayer. According to his command, he always took the weak people into consideration. They thought something had happened, or else that a revelation had reached him. After the ritual prayer, they asked him. He said, Hussein had climbed on my back when I had gone down in prostration. As he had the habit of doing this in my home, I could not bring myself to rush him, so I waited until he himself came down. This is why the prostration took so long. At the same time, the Prophet insists that all people, especially the companions, know that and see with their own eyes how he loves these two children, Hassan and Hussein, and their mother and their father, with more love than anyone's heart can hold. If not, why does he treat Fatima with so much respect among all his gathering? Why does he kiss her hand and her face in the mosque so much and with such insistence? When he speaks from the pulpit, he constantly tries to show his spirit and feelings to his family, to everyone. After his prayers, he adds the words, God loved them as well, referring to Hassan, Hussein, Fatima, and Ali. Their satisfaction is my satisfaction, and my satisfaction is God's satisfaction. God, whoever bothers them has bothered me, and whoever bothers me bothers thee. These words, why all these expressions of feelings and showing of love and showing of affection, especially to this family? The near future will answer all of these whys. The fate of this family, the fate of each and every member of this family gives the answer to these whys. These all begin with the Prophet. The first sacrifice is Fatima, then Ali, then Hassan, and then Hussein, and then finally Zainab. In the 5th year of Ali and Fatima's marriage, 1 year after Hussein a girl is born to this family. She had to be born and she had to closely follow Hussein, Zainab. And in the following year, another girl, Kulsum. Zainab and Kulsum, they have the same names as the daughters of the Prophet. Yes, Fatima is becoming everyone to the Prophet and his only one. His Zainab dies, Ruqayya and Kulsum also die. In the 8th year of the migration, God gave him a son Ibrahim, but he also died. Now there is Muhammad and his only remaining child Fatima. Fatima and her children. This is the family of the Prophet. The love of the Prophet for Hassan and Hussein increases. These two children have become his whole life, and he spends all of his free time with them. Dear readers, we come to the next subtopic of this chapter, and we are reading at page 142 at the moment. The subtopic is the compassion of Muhammad. The Prophet is a man who showed great strength of decision and speech, whose sword was feared by all the Caesars, kings, and powerful rulers of that time. His enemies trembled from anger. His enemies trembled from his anger. At the same time, he was a most sensitive person with a heart which beats with the smallest wave of kindness and a spirit which is excited by the slightest touch of truth, sincerity, and kindness. At the terrible battle of Hunain, where the enemies had united in order to put him under their swords and destroy him and drag him to defeat and death, 6,000 people were taken prisoners, and 40,000 camels and sheep and other plunder was seized. A man came out from among the defeated enemy and said, "O Muhammad, among these prisoners are your wet nurse and your aunts and uncles." He then added, "If you were in the presence of your nurse, we would expect kindness from her, and you are greater than any of us." They brought a woman forward. "I am the sister of your Prophet." The Prophet said, "What sign do you have?" She showed her shoulder and said, "These are the marks of your teeth which you made when I carried you on my back and you became very angry and it me." The memories so flooded his mind as he remembered the kindnesses of his nurse and her daughters at the time of his childhood in the desert amidst this tribe. He was so affected and put up in a state of wonder that tears gathered in his eyes, and he said, "I give away my share and the shares of all the children of Abdul Muttalib. Be present in the mosque tomorrow. After the ritual prayer, announce your request to the gathering. I will give my family's answer to you, and perhaps other tribes will follow me." The next day he did as he said he would, and he freed all of them. A few people objected to giving back everything, were satisfied when they were promised something later. In the home and among the family, he is like this. To the outside world, he is a warrior, a politician, a commander, full of strength and power, and inside the home, a kind father, a humble husband, simple and intimate. Even though his wives were sometimes rude to him, he never once struck them. They caused him to suffer because they could not bear living with the poverty in his home. He would leave them and go out and sleep in a storage room. He would put up ladder and sleep on the second floor of the room, or he would sweep the floor and sleep on the earth. He lived like this for 1 month. Finally, his wives, who both loved him and had faith in him, would surrender and would become still from the shame of their behavior. He announced that they should either choose divorce and this world or he and poverty. All except one preferred the second proposal and remained with him. Whenever he leaves his home and wherever he goes, whether walking in the streets or bazaar of a Medina, he takes one of these two children upon his shoulder. In the mosque, he goes to the pulpit to speak to the people who are standing listening to him. Below, his grandchildren are in the house next to the mosque. They leave the house wearing red shirts, begin walking, and fall down. Suddenly, the Prophet's eyes fall upon them. He cannot take his eyes off them. He sees that they walk with difficulty. They fall and get up again. He can no longer bear this. He stops in the middle of his words, anxiously comes down from the pulpit, picks them up, and he had done when they were babies, hold them in the arms, and again returns to the pulpit. He sees the people are amazed. They are surprised by that he wishes to ask their pardon. Because of his children, he has interrupted his words. While he kindly held the children, he returned to the pulpit and said, God spoke rightly when he said, your children and wealth are your trials and tribulations. My eyes fell upon these two children, and I saw that each step they took, they fell down. I could not bear it, so I broke off my words and went and got them. They say his compassion towards Hussein was different. The power and the depth of his sensitivities exceeded all limits. He took hold of his shoulders. He played with him and sang for him. He stretched himself out. He put his feet upon his chest and took his hand. Full of love and tenderness, he kissed him, and from the bottom of his heart he said, God loved him. I love him. One day he had an invitation to go to some place. He left the house with a few of his companions. In the bazaar, his eyes suddenly fell upon Hussein, who was playing with his playmates. The Prophet stood before the children. He extended his hands to take his grandchild. The child ran from one corner to the other. The Prophet, trying to catch him and laughing, caught hold of him. He put one hand on the back of the child, and with the other he took hold of his chin and kissed him and said, Hussein is from me, and I am from Hussein. God loves whoever loves Hussein. His companions wondrously looked on. One turned to another and said, the Prophet treats his grandchildren in such a manner. By God, I have a son, and I have never kissed him. The Prophet, for all of his coldness and anger, turned to him and said, whosoever shows no kindness receives no kindness. Days and nights came and went, and Fatima tasted the sweet moments of happiness and the bitter memories of the past. The poverty she had suffered faded. The battle of Khyber came, and the youths gave them the grazing area of Fadak to the Prophet. He gave it to Fatima. Fatima, who now had 4 children, finds life less difficult to cope with. The conquest of Mecca. Mecca is conquered. Fatima accompanies her victorious father and hero husband, who had held the flag in his hand. They enter Mecca. They witness the greatest victory of Islam. She revisits the city where she had been born. She remembers the good and the bad times she had had in Mecca, the mosque of Kaaba and what had happened, the house of her father, her life with her sisters who were no longer alive, birthplace of Fatima, the valley of Abu Talib, the grave of her mother Khadija. She returns full of the happiness of victory and satisfaction, drowned in honors and goodness. Her father is little by little being freed from the enmity of his enemies. His shadow falls upon the whole of the peninsula. Her husband is a blow to reckon all the battles of Badr, Uhud, Khandaq, Khaybar, and the conquest of Mecca. One blow of his at these battles, or even Hunain and Yemen, are worth more than the prayers of men and jinn and their intimacy until the day of judgment. And her children, the only fruits of sorrow and difficulties and union with love and faith, and the only continuation of the seed of her father, and she herself, the heart of the family, center of the home, and pure family of the Prophet. Yes, it is as if Fatima is compensating for all of the sorrow, bitterness, and virtues. That which fills her more than anything else is that her children so fill the heart and the soul of her father, and she can compensate for the sufferings of her beloved father, for whom no son remains, and all of those daughters except her die in their youth, who have no further children from his marriages, more than 13 years after the death of Khadija, other than Ibrahim, from an Egyptian slave who dies while still a nursing infant. Now, with her beloved children, Hassan and Hussein, Zainab and Kulsum, she is compensated. The sweet taste of seeing them, the rawness which all of his life had been nothing but bitterness, had a chance to become familiar with the happiness and pleasure which life can offer, particularly since his age had reached over 60 and his feelings and needs for these children are more than ever. Life has been kind. A sweet smile appears upon Fatma's face. A halo of goodness, honor, and generosity fell around her house. Fatima, enjoying the unexplainable kindness of her father, the greatness of her honorable husband, and the pleasure which her children bring her, lives in a throne full of good fortune which is close to all of her desires and aspirations. But all of this peacefulness is just the quiet before the storm. The storm comes. It is black, frightening, and like a wind, takes all of her peace and destroys her home. The Prophet is bedridden. Dear readers, we stop over here. This is the middle of page 146, and in our next sitting, we will be beginning from the same page with the next subtopic, which is the death of the Prophet. So goodbye for now. All our regards for you and good wishes for you. And this is, I must remind you all once again, that this is being brought to you from the platform of Kashana-e-Baseerat. Thank you very much.